Welcome to Entrepreneurship Unplugged. I'm York Zuki, and today I have the true honor to be with the human behavior sciences podcast legend, multiple author, Timothy Maurice. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for your time.
York. It's good to be here.
What started your journey or your curiosity in human behavior, in this human behavior field?
I come from an extreme family. On one side of my family, I have like these super shockingly, unsuccessful people. And then on the opposite side, I've got these uber successful people. So one, it's framed like I've got an uncle who spent most of his life in prison. I've got an uncle who's a federal judge who worked under Obama. And so I always looked at the two of them, these extremes, and wondered what happened. What were the genome impacts? What were the challenges around nurturing? And then I found that it was often simple things, very small, subtle things in the brain, like their names. The uncle who spent a lot of time in prison was named Billy Jack. The uncle who's a federal judge is named Joe. I've got an uncle who's a megachurch pastor who's named James. And I looked at, is it possible that their names impacted them? Something simple. And it looks like it did. The book of James is in the Bible, so he became a pastor, right? In our area, growing up, we had a judge called Judge Joe Brown who would have influenced my uncle who became a judge named Joe, right? And so when I started looking at the neurological implications of the little things that can drive us off on this incredible journey, there's no coincidence that I'm a writer and my surname is Webster. Right?
I love it. But this is actually very interesting because our show is really about entrepreneurship, small businesses, a lot of startups watch it. And often we almost suppress that which has influenced us. Maybe we're not even conscious about it.
We're not conscious most of it.
And in your studying of human behavior, in your understanding, you've also worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. What have you found? What insights can you apply from human behavior to the science or the art of entrepreneurship?
I think, like you said, the vast majority of what drives us, we're not aware of. So there's a concept in behavioral science called your stated preferences versus your revealed preferences. So let's use toothpaste for an example. If you ask people why they brush their teeth, they will say dental, even they market based on this. Dental, I want to make sure my teeth are healthy. When the truth is, we just want to avoid being embarrassed. You don't want a bad breath. Bad breath will screw up an engagement. So the revealed preference is we just want, if you look at the time when people actually brush their teeth, it's when they're trying not to be embarrassed versus the idea. And I think entrepreneurship, the revealed preference is most people want independence. There's an optimism bias where we are overly optimistic as human beings, right? If you look at Tali Sharot's book, Optimism Bias, she speaks specifically about this case, why so many people, despite the number of failures, we all believe inherently that we're different.
Yeah.
I think Plato argued that in our unconscious mind, we have this ideal version of ourselves. And we hold this ideal version of ourselves as spiritual. We believe that this version of ourselves, our most fertile self, our most powerful self is a real person, and that person can be an entrepreneur. That person, despite the fact that all these restaurants have closed, mine will make it. And that person who we measure ourselves against, which brands manipulate against, right? Nike says, you can just do it, because in your ideal self, you're doing it. In your ideal unconscious version of yourself, you are conquering, you're doing extraordinary things. So brands, and the reason why people get butt lifts and so forth, we all trying to reach this version of ourselves. And I think entrepreneurship offers that opportunity.
That's a fantastic angle, because I see it even in my entrepreneurial journey. It was often something in my head that fuels the desire to be my own boss, to create a global empire, whatever the ambitions is. And then you go out there and the market slaps you in the face, and rather harshly.
Yeah.
This unforgiving beast. How do most people, in your experience, deal when they go away from this, who I think I can be, to what the market then tells me who I am?
It's always an interesting moment. Sometimes I've been fortunate to interview, I had a show for 4 years on CNBC where I interviewed female entrepreneurs and leaders across the continent. And one entrepreneur named Natasha Sedaris, who has a restaurant chain called Tasha's, that's now expanded to the Middle East and so forth. For her, when she was getting knocked down and she was measured against her ideal version, it was her father in her head that inspired her. And oftentimes it is something symbolic, it's an experience, it's a family member, it's a mentor, it's some force, some life force that drives you past the fact that being knocked down was the end, and I chose to bounce back. And she said watching her father suffer and struggle and not have access to this keeps her going when the prices don't really make sense and the margins are really tight. And when she's overseas and people don't know who she is and she still believes, she keeps her father in mind.
That is so beautiful. Tell me something, the advice when you work with entrepreneurs, or even in your many years of interviewing and researching, what advice can you give to entrepreneurs who are now being faced with this reality check, with this slap in the face about who they really are versus they think they are?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I went back to school to MIT to study the brain and to help people understand how to optimize and position themselves. So I'll share a few things that I think every single entrepreneur can do. One is hydrate your brain. Here's why. When you hydrate your brain and you drink more sort of neutral water that has less acid, like if you like sparkling water has a lot of acid. It's a very acidic. And what you really want to optimize for is to enable your creative brain to have its full potential. So very simply, when you drink a lot of water, you create alpha waves in the brain. And the role of alpha waves is to help you make connections and solve problems quicker. So you're faced with a dilemma, you're faced with a challenge, you look at a scenario and you go, actually, I don't know, or I feel overwhelmed. There may be answers in your unconscious mind, there may be answers in pockets in your brain, but you can't facilitate the connections because you haven't hydrated your brain. So you want to position yourself to solve problems by being able to make connections in the brain quicker. Another challenge that inhibits the creative problem-solving brain is the fact that there are so many toxins built up in the mind through stress, chemicals, that there's so much anxiety and your brain is inhibited. So spend a little bit more time in nature. Maybe you should come visit your lodge. Maybe what we've discovered is that if you spend 3 straight days in nature, they call it nature bathing, that your disease-fighting cells is boosted by up to 50%. 3 straight days in nature.
Wow.
And why is that important? Because your immune system is charged. Your brain is positioned to tackle complexity. And so often, entrepreneurs ignore these things, which is basically to position your brain to be able to tackle complexity. So another thing is sleep. Now, this stuff, it sounds super simple, but let me show you that if you are staring at your phone as you're going to sleep, the blue lights in the background trick your unconscious mind to thinking that it's daytime, and you only enter the healing part of sleep much later, and you can wake up with up to 5 to 10% less access to your own IQ. So by not sleeping, or by staring at this blue light in the background of your phone or your TV, you are reducing your own access to your own IQ. It's the simple things, as I started this conversation. It's the little things, the small tweaks. By, for example, auditing your relationships around you. Ask yourself, do I have relationships with people like York, who are upbeat, enthusiastic about life? People who race cars like in the background. People full of energy and life and vivaciousness. I mean, this guy is serious about this car.
Yeah. And he's trying to
Look at this sort of laundry list of things that you can do as an entrepreneur. I want to go back to 1918, to the previous sort of pandemic, where there was a woman who owned a cafe, and she looked around and she said, people look miserable. What can I do? How can I delight the people around me? And she took a little bit of dough and she took some chocolate chunks and she decided, this is what I have right now. This is what I have. This is all I've got. And she put them together and she created the first ever chocolate chip cookie. And she looked around and she says, if I can delight the people around me with something they've never tried before. She used this innovative moment to build the chocolate chip cookie, but more importantly, in the middle of a pandemic where people weren't spending, to create a power position for herself as an entrepreneur. She didn't just sort of say, what is it that I need? She looked around and said, what do people need? And in tough, highly complex periods, oftentimes people just need to be delighted.
Yes.
It's the little things, positive energy, positive attitude. And in delighting people with whatever your chocolate chip cookie is, I don't know if you're listening what your chocolate chip cookie is.
Mine is coffee, by the way.
Yeah, right? If you can offer someone something delightful that arouses the senses, it's extraordinary how people don't forget how they felt around you. And for me, I've witnessed that from Tasha, founded Tasha's, to entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, this young lady's name, Charlene and Arlene, who started a coding school, that they were able to delight people with their energy. And I know when I came to South Africa and I came to this continent, I knew one person. I mean, you guys have similar stories coming here. And I just know that part of my success has been sometimes found in a smile.
I love it. But I want to touch on that. A lot of entrepreneurs think, oh, what is this, healthy mind, healthy body, healthy mind kind of nonsense. But it's so true, and we see it in a lot of the research around the world, that it's almost counterintuitive to what the culture of entrepreneurship makes us narrate. Work hard, be at your office, cram 18-hour days in. And yet, when you go for a walk, absolutely, when you spend 3 days in nature or 3 hours, I didn't know about the water, that's very interesting, but when you give your body a chance to breathe, you really release a lot of solutions that maybe were in a traffic jam in your brain. So absolutely love it.
Let's get a little more technical for the technical crats out there. So the counterintuitive thing you're speaking about is that everyone has told you, if I want to solve a problem, I go in this direction, right? Yeah. So let's talk about this direction. The prefrontal cortex, the problem solving, the CEO, the executive of the brain that we've been told since the Enlightenment period that we should focus on, is the part of the brain that's fairly new in human history. But this part of the brain is fascinating in that it goes into a spin cycle when you're trying to solve a problem. Imagine in the front of your brain, there's this spinning happening. Now, one of the reasons why you struggle to solve a problem when this spinning cycle is happening, because it alienates other parts of the brain, like the emotive, deeper region of the brain that's sensory driven. So one of the reasons why we can all relate, everyone watching can relate to this. When you stop thinking about something, often the answer comes. Yeah. It's because you've stopped that spin cycle. So when you go for a walk, this thing you think that is super soft, when you go for a walk and you focus on nature, or you decide I want to paint, you focus your attention on something and you stop the spin cycle, and the answers start to connect through this pattern making process that's very counterintuitive. Some of my best ideas have come when I wasn't thinking, when I stopped the spin cycle. There's one other thing for the technical crowd that I want to speak about, which is designing algorithms. One of my contentions right now with social media is that they're so smart and they're so They're driving algorithms that control us without us being aware. So here's an example. For those who have Netflix or YouTube, you will know that if I'm in a comedic mood, I click on Chris Rock or I click on Dave Chappelle, and then the algorithm is trying to ensure that I stay on the platform. So it makes assumptions for me. So instead of showing me a white comedian, the assumption is I clicked on a black one, so let me show you more black comedians. So I've learned to hack the algorithm. I know now if I watch Bill Burr, a white comedian, that it's not going to show me any more black. So what I will do is I'll click on black comedians and white comedian and Indian, and then slide the bar over so it assumes that I've watched these episodes so I can get a diverse input into my life. And so the same thing happens in your business. You've got to design for what you want. You got to play the game. Technologically, I call it your second brain. You've got to design. You got to say to yourself, in this day, on that day, at this particular period, this particular network, I've got to design the algorithm that is prompting and bringing into my life, into my energy force, what I want. Because if I don't say, on this day, I'm going to listen to this podcast, I'm going to watch York's video on this day, I'm going to drink water on this day, I'm not getting the type of input that I need for my entrepreneurial journey. So instead of being frustrated by these algorithms, I've realized that I need to design my second brain algorithm for what it is I'm trying to achieve. And that is very simple, is that if I know I need a contact from someone resourceful like York, then I'm going to put that in my diary, and I'm going to put the feedback, and I'm going to put what engagement we are, what journey we are on, what trajectory we are on, and I'm going to map the inputs that I need. And let me go one step even further. So let's say I discover that York is someone who loves soccer. Part of my algorithm is going to be, I'm going to tap into his value system at a very high level. I'm going to send him a link.
Stop for a second. There was some kind of magnetic thing that happened because I moved it. Because this is magnetic.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
still running.
Still running?
Yeah, but it's something's just wrong with the video. So I'm gonna.
Can I help?
Yeah, it says it's lost connection because of the magnet. It says recording. Sorry.
Does that pink light on top of the camera mean anything?
No. But it was 17 minutes, so
Yeah, no problem.
it's still running. Okay, now it's working.
Perfect.
So we have to cut also minute 17. Okay.
No, this is actually cool. This goes into the bloopers section.
Okay, but it did,
Hi.
it did take it away.
Sorry.
It did take away the setting of the widescreen. Can you just set it back?
Your blood.
We learn about magnetic tables now. Don't move the table, guys, too much. It's just shaking a little bit the camera. Didn't want to disturb before, but now I do. Okay.
There you go. Still recording?
Still recording. Talk for a minute.
Hello.
Timothy?
Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1,
Okay,
2.
great.
Okay, thank you.
So it's 18:39. Okay.
Yeah, so designing your second brain is, see it as an algorithm. See it as, if I want to get the most out of the people around me, I need to be interested in like what social media algorithms are doing. So social media algorithms from YouTube, they're predicting. Now it's not always the case. So if you like soccer, maybe you're not feeling soccer that day. But if I send you something, if I send you a link or an article about something interesting, then what I'm doing is I'm tapping into your highest values, and I'm triggering chemicals that bond you to me. And by doing that, even on a much deeper unconscious level, I'm creating an emotional pattern that links us. And that's the algorithm effect, is that the Netflix, the YouTubes, they're becoming highly successful. The social media platforms are driving people into these emotional spaces that are bonding them to the platform. And as an entrepreneur, when you're building a network and you build a relationship between consumers, you've got to design for that emotional connection. It can't be just about you. You've got to study and understand the highest values of the people you need to connect with. And so design for that.
And you know, it's such an interesting point because so I do a lot of work in the access to markets for most entrepreneurs. It means finding clients. And one of the things that we found is that a lot of entrepreneurs go to market hoping to sell. What they don't do is create that connection. And I absolutely love, because access to market challenges and access to networks. But who's going to create a link to you unless you tap into something?
You've got to genuinely give a damn about people. You can't fake this thing.
Yeah.
People can see through you. You can be in a rural area with elderly woman who has never had any education. But if you're not genuine about her life and her journey and her story, she will literally write you off. She'll create a barrier between her heart and you. And that's what's happening with a lot of entrepreneurs. You see these entrepreneurs who are not, let's say you launch a retail store, but you're never there.
Yeah.
Do you really care? And I think,
do you live the brand?
Do you live it?
The promise?
Are you passionate about it? Do you feel for what your consumer is experiencing, or you just see this as
a stepping stone towards a financial target?
Yeah, sure. And if you're a venture capitalist and you're at a level where you're just investing in broad kind of portfolios or whatever, that's a different conversation. But we're talking about people who are in the grind, and I'm assuming that's who you're speaking to in this, who we're speaking to in this conversation. Is that I have to, when I write an article or I produce, I'm thinking about the next book that I'm writing called Arouse, which really looks at, if you're an out-group member, how do you arouse the in-group to be interested in you? What are the neurological implications? What are the practical implications? That's what I'm interested in. So I have to go into the mind. I have to create an archetype, and I have to go into the mind and the soul and really spend time there so that I know that I'm reaching this person. What are their vulnerabilities? What freaks them out? And so I just feel that if I look at the entrepreneurs who've made a lot of missteps, I'll give you an example. The woman who was, I think she's the first woman ever to start an airline, Cesar Imzamela. She started an airline called Blue Fly Crane, and it didn't succeed. But I imagine it didn't succeed for a number of reasons. But one that I observed, even after interviewing her, was that she wanted to bring luxury back to flying. And that was noble. But if you really spend time with what people want right now, people just want to get to A to B. Nobody cares anymore. Like the most successful airlines,
bus like Ryanair, EasyJet.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Fly SA Fair is wildly successful, relatively speaking, because they get you on, they get you there, and it's efficient. It's like never running late, type of thing. So, if sometimes we get so caught up in our own emotional desires that we lose the connection with the consumer.
But one thing that I think is so crucial about what you said is, and it's actually captured beautifully in one of your books, all the links are below this interview, but was around, okay, great, so you have a passion to solve something, you're now in the store, but who are you? Like, in a lot of the work that I do with especially startups, they don't know who they are. They've never done work on themselves. They're running with an idea, they have some passion and interest and hobbies, and maybe they think they have the next $1 million idea, or hopefully $100 million idea. How do you discover who you really are?
Yeah, so my publishing journey is 2003, 2000. In my publishing journey, I started sort of asking the question, what does it mean to share your values to the world? How do you do it in a consistent way where you leave an imprint? And I wrote this book called, it was published in 2006, called Thinking About You.
Yeah.
Right? So we started this conversation. Then the second book I wrote was called Personation, which was about how do you reinvent yourself? What happens when you outgrow what you're known for? And then my third book, 3 years later, was it's called Soul to Soul, about authentically positioning yourself. And then to get to your point, where I'm answering the question now, my fourth book was it's called PBQ, or Personal Brand Intelligence, Personal Brand Mastery. And I created a framework for that. So the framework is based on 3 bodies. Your internal body, which provides your foundation, is your body 1. That is your skills. What skills do you have? What's realistic? Sometimes we lie to ourselves because we get this ideal version. If I want to be a runway model, I'm not York. I'm not tall enough for this thing. You know, there's a height requirement. I can't be York. So you got to be honest about the basics. What is your foundation? What are your skills? What do what do you have that people can't see? What is the internal dimension? Then your second body, which is your image, how you present to the world, everything that people can see. The third body is everything you're connected to and you're associated to. So I'll give you an example using Barack Obama. So my cousin in Washington, D.C., her neighbor ran his Senate campaign. Before he became president, she ran his Senate campaign, and she says that they were able to raise funds for this no-name senator because his association in his third body, which was his wife, was so extraordinary because she had 2 Ivy League degrees. She was such an extraordinary lawyer and such a powerful person that they felt that people gave to his Senate campaign because she was so serious. Because his wife, he was able to attract such a powerful partner that he was investment worthy. So the association may not be your partner, but what associations do you have that are anchoring your identity? What associations do you have? I mean, what I would suggest you think about doing is that if you're on LinkedIn or you're on social media, try to aggregate your identity by posting things that have value to people, by reposting things, by creating unique content that demonstrate, maybe you are a no-name person like Barack Obama was, but what you can do is you can create reputational value by creating associations or aggregating, reposting content that has enormous value.
Love it. I absolutely love it, and I think there's so much wisdom that you're sharing. And I think really for entrepreneurs, the best thing that I hear around what you're saying is none of this costs money.
Because if you're in an area that bores you, you're not going to remain curious.
Absolutely.
Right? Your brain is going to be muted, and you're like, whatever. But put yourself in an area that really does pull out the best in you. And I'm in an area now where I'm trying to solve human behavioral challenges, and every day there's technology that's changing how we see the world. And what I knew a year ago could be obsolete. So it forces me to stay on my toes.
And I think there's also a beautiful piece of advice. One thing that I want to take out of this conversation for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of, especially younger entrepreneurs, like myself, wishful thinking, is that they come to this incredibly exciting roller coaster of a journey with a very ego-driven agenda. Yes, it's me. Doesn't matter if we don't know exactly who me is, but we're looking for fancy titles, masters of a universe, very important, cool names. And what I'm hearing in a way is also we live in a world where knowing who you are, what drives you, who your customers are, the messaging that you use to create the connection, whether it's content sharing, knowledge sharing, and so forth, means so that we're moving towards a niche. So say Timothy is focused on this, York is focused on this, and so forth. The best part about this exciting time that we live in is that your niche can be 1 billion people big.
Sure.
You know, you are an entrepreneur who specializes in agricultural or how to grow crops at the back of a township or location little shack. Well, there's 500 million people who could be your customers for your YouTube channel.
Easily, yeah.
Amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, I would like, can I give like a closing?
Yes, love.
So, signaling is become a really important subject in the kind of behavioral science in the areas that I work. So let's use you and I right now for an example. Let's close with you and I. If I look at how you're dressed and how you've packaged, let's talk about what you're signaling to the world. Can we do that? Versus what I'm signaling. So you've got cufflinks on, you've got a white shirt, you've got a pocket square, you've got a beautiful blazer. What are you saying? What are you signaling? What are you trying to say to the world? Okay? I've got these weird bright shoes with like some colorful socks.
Totally cool, by the way.
Okay, so in certain contexts, I look like a clown, right? In certain contexts, you look boring. But in other contexts, you are signaling to the unconscious mind James Bond. You're signaling you're signaling discipline, because a white shirt communicates to the unconscious mind class, integrity, trust.
I didn't know
Cufflinks signal discipline because you took time for detail, right? You are signaling, there's a concept called enclosed cognition, where what you're signaling impacts your nervous system and your body. So when you step out with this James Bond effect, unconsciously you feel like you can conquer, but you're also signaling to the unconscious mind of your consumers that I can conquer, that I'm disciplined, that I am focused. Like pinstripes came from the post-Victorian period, where pinstripes were all about the idea of thinking between the lines, thinking strategically and disciplined and focused. And that was the brief that was given to the fabric weavers. If I look at myself, I've got on a jacket, I button it all the way to the top. It communicates a bit of an art heritage. And so today, if I look at my schedule, I had a lot of creative conversations. So I was signaling to myself, even though people couldn't see me on Zoom, I was signaling to myself that I put on my creative clothing. Think about what you're signaling.
Beautiful.
In every moment, think about, what am I trying to say? Because you are saying something, whether you are aware and intentional or not. Think about the idea that every person is looking for signals. The unconscious mind is wired to scan every single environment, every single human being, to try to discern, is this person trustworthy? Is this person accountable? The brain is an anticipation machine. So it's looking for entrepreneurs to see, in 10 years' time, what can I anticipate from this journey? And often, if you signal the right thing early on,
You attract them also.
you attract more, and people feel comfortable on your journey.
That is so incredibly powerful. Thank you. This was truly an eye-opener. I hope you enjoyed it. All the way from downtown Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks for watching.
Cheers. Awesome. That was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you stop it in the right way? I don't want to fuck up anything. That was such a hard